David, thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to have you on because AI is such an insanely important topic right now. Everybody's talking about it, and there is
Everybody.
mass confusion everywhere. Why don't we start off with a quick introduction? Give us a little background on who you are and where you work and all that, and then let's just dive into the subject at hand.
Well, Bill, thank you very much for having me. So excited to be on this. So excited to have this great conversation with you. My name is David Mantica. I'm the managing director of SoftEd. It's a business that I own. We do B2B training for Fortune 1000 companies, and AI just happens to be one of those things we train on. Outside of that, I also do a lot of consulting work, fractional CMO work, fractional business development work, fractional advisory work as well. I've been in the training space, the for-profit corporate training space for 31 years now, which has been a fun, exciting, crazy ride. It's a highly competitive industry. If you have a brainstem and a credit card machine, you can become a training company. There's no barrier to entry. There's no transfer costs. So I've been living in this competitive monster. So it's really got me some cool skills. So I look forward to talking about all things AI and other with you.
Yeah, I am. So everywhere you turn, AI is, at the forefront of everything. And I think we've been through the first wave of, I'm just going to use AI and fire everybody. Like we watched that train wreck happen, and then sort of people have been recuperating about it. You've had the benefit of sitting in front of businesses large and
Oh,
small.
yeah.
Where should they start and where are they? Well, let's start with this. Where are they getting it wrong? How should they be looking at AI and how are they looking at it incorrectly? Because I think that's the thing people are asking is what should I do with this thing?
They got it wrong is they thought they could build their own large language model to put the totality of their company's intellectual property and capabilities into this big pool and get value out of it. It became a train wreck. And the MIT report that came out in August on the state of AI showed that in glaring detail.
Yeah.
So what they got wrong and what they're trying to fix is there are very, very specific use cases where AI can make a huge difference within organizations. So at your corporate level, you've got to take a very use case approach to the projects you're attacking and truly understand the return and the business processes that you want to automate, or if you want to create a small, focused, private large language model. The other side of the hat is that the personal productivity side takes more than just magically say, instead of 5 of you, there's 2 of you, use AI to get the job done. And that's the other mistake that has occurred. They have not empowered the teams that are left behind with a detailed enough understanding of how to approach the use of these tools to get maximum success at that personal job role productivity level.
Do you think that there was enough somebody who early adopted on this thing? I found that there was so much trial error, like literally people building the boat on the water as they were going. Do you think that there was training behind most businesses on how to even
No,
think about using this? I don't think
no.
there wasn't enough knowledge about how the tool worked to even begin to train
We
anybody, was
just
there?
started seeing companies now start doing it. We at the company SoftEd, we take a 4-level approach to helping organizations deploy AI. And I tell you what, they most of them haven't even started. They just threw it out there, learn as you go, figure it out. Some of them even did it before they had a policy. Well, we're not even a policy, just don't use company information with it. So
Yeah.
yes, there was a lot of that going on, and which causes a lot of confusion, and you're starting to slowly see, okay, the pullback. Like we have one story where they gave 6,000 Copilot licenses out to an entire team, and then they were
6,000.
6,000, which just do the math on how expensive Copilot is, unless they were getting credits from Microsoft as a vendor, and they realized that 90% of them weren't being used, and they
Well,
pulled them back.
and 100% probably not being used correctly.
Yes, yes. So these are the
That's a
type of
lot of
things you
money.
start hearing about when you start having some really cool conversations. So we've done 7 conferences, and in those conferences, we start hearing about the changes and the adjustments. Now, just because there's so much change going on with the vendors that provide these services doesn't mean you can't play. You can't use, you can get productivity right now. You have to be smart and focused and execute in a rational way.
I read an article the other day that said, for those of us that are in it, it seems ubiquitous already.
Yeah.
It seems like it's everywhere
Yes.
already. But there's only 16%
Yes.
of people that are actually using this
That's
thing.
right.
And about 80% of those, that's a fudge number, are using it as a glorified Google
Search.
search engine,
Yeah.
right? Like most people don't understand how to even begin with this. So let's go back to this. If you're a business that's trying to figure out, should I, shouldn't I, what should I think about it? How do you instruct people to begin wrapping their head around,
Mhm.
you know, AI has become such this like uber wonder tool in the sort of mythology of it all.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what the reality is. So if I'm a small business, I'm 2, 3 people, how should
That's
I
even
think
easier.
about.
That's the small business side is actually so much easier than the big corporate side in a lot of
Well, and
cases.
that's partly why I'm starting there, because I figure if we can start with one Lego, we can stack them up.
Yeah,
But I mean, if
so
if I'm a small business, how do I think about that?
so
Where
you're the
should I be?
owner, you have a team. Okay, first off, I want a policy. This is what I'm going to allow to be used. This is what I'm not going to be allowed to use. And this is the stack I'm going to start with. So now your team has a box to work within because we as humans don't like to work when there's not some type of framework. We all might say we want complete autonomy. That's not the case. We like to be put in some type of box, and most of the companies don't give people enough of a box. You're going to use Claude. You're going to use Claude with this type of tooling, with this type of protection. Make sure you click these 3 things on your Claude so that you're not sharing your information, and this is the information you can work with. Bingo. That's the first step.
So why is that? Let's break that down just even one step further. Why are those parameters important?
Because without it, you don't know what to do. So you and I together could probably list 20 tools right now within the nice little brainstorm, right? And
Yeah.
all 20 of them are going to have different functionality. Imagine you sitting there as the, partner COO of this small startup. All right, where am I going to start? The boss man, my partner just told me to start using AI. Am I going to use Cowork? Am I going to use Claude Regular? Am I use your free ChatGPT? Am I going to use Copilot? We get Copilot over Microsoft. Am I going to use Perplexity? Oh, am I going to go over and try OpenClaw out? This thing's really cool. You get lost in the spin of all your options, and before you know it, you're focused on trying to research the tool before you get any value out of using any of these tools. So that's number one. And number two, I need to know how to start. And most of us, you're not one of those. I mean, your world has been around creating from nothing, right? That's why the awards back there, that's your successes and all the crazy stuff you've done. Very few people are like that. People need a starting point. So, okay, you can use Claude paid. Here's your license. And these are the things you can do. That gives them the starting point to begin to start figuring out how to fit it into how they work. Here's the biggest secret that nobody talks about. Everybody uses these tools differently. Every individual uses these tools differently. And that makes it hard for me to come out and give you a playbook. Here's your playbook, Bill. Here's your
Yeah.
playbook, Sally. I can't. I can give you parameters and I can give you suggestions, but ultimately you're going to start to incorporate them based on the use cases that give you the most value. And that's why you need a little bit of structure before you can run.
I remember the first time someone showed me Netscape Navigator. The first time I ever sat down in front of a web browser,
Yeah.
ever. And there was one computer that it came into at the agency, and there was a woman on the team who had become educated on it enough to give a presentation to the rest of us. And I remember like 30 people all gathering around this computer, and she was saying, here's this window, and it's this blinking cursor in what looked by today's standards like, a Google or a Yahoo page, right? There wasn't anything to it. It was just this little thing with a couple of legal things underneath it. And I remember nobody said anything for like 20 seconds. And I leaned over and I said, "What do you do with it?" And she said, "Well, you can look up anything." And I said, "Well, like what?" And she said, "Anything."
I-
And I said, "Well, what would you want to look up?" Like
Exactly. There
it
you got
couldn't even
it.
it didn't even occur to anybody in the room. No one had any idea where to even begin with this tool. So I think one of the things that's really interesting is to think about, what can this tool do and how is it different in terms of how you can talk to it to get a response.
Yeah.
With Google, we think about things in terms of, I need blue jeans, right? Or give me the specs on something, or what, cars are on sale this weekend or whatever. Like it's very truncated, perfunctory this
And some
way.
of those searches are going to cause you to have a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
So I think when you look at Google, it's really cool, right? But you have to do a crap ton of work still. You have to
Yeah.
parse through the links. You got to you can trust the algorithm that it's going to be giving you relevant, or you're going to detail and parse through the links. You're going to parse through. Some people who are really into are going to go 3 levels deep. Back in the day when you go pages, and he still does that. Some of us are just going to take the sponsor link because we think the sponsor paid money to be there, that it must be extremely valuable. Some's going to get the sponsor link, or someone's going to be lazy and not even realize it's a sponsor link and just take that and then dig into it from there. So that's all well and good, but there's a level of engagement to even get to before you can start making decisions. AI actually gives you an insight, so if you type in, tell me what cars are for sale, now I add a couple more things, and the next thing you know, in my marketplace are going to be 3 dealerships with the specific cars for sale with the amount of money. I'm going to have an actionable insight in my pane without having to do anything else. And that's a
And then you
big
can build
difference.
on that,
Then you
which is
build on
so
that.
different. Right. So then it's, okay, well, if these cars are for sale, tell me which dealerships have the best reputation
Yep.
in town
Mhm.
and have the best ratings or reviews. And it's going to go find that and bring it back to you. So
Because in order to
much,
do that with Google, you're gonna start another window. You're
right.
gonna ask for the ratings and reviews. You're gonna have this window open with the initial cars and this rating open with the window of reviews, and you're gonna try to cross-pollinate. You're gonna say, "Okay, let me go back where or let me go look at that, or let me write this down, or let me go back and look at this, write this down." Now, in doing the prior that you just talked about, generative AI, you have to trust that the algorithm is providing you the best possible information.
Sure.
And this is where the fear of the hallucinations come in, and where some people still aren't bought on doing this type of work with Gen AI compared to using Google. But this type of work is it's actually just a nice little uptick to what Google can do. What we really have to get into is the number one thing I tell people now is that because of regenerative augmentation, you could put a document in Claude and you could do 1,000 things with it. And we have this slide that shows 12 things that you can do with existing information that just blows your mind. Slice, dice, parse, pull, augment, grab, reorganize. And so one of the first things I like to do with basic classes is I like to put those 2 slides up, put a document in, and show them 5 or 6 of those in action, what it looks like.
It's remarkable how much information it can provide to you based on, I mean, what seemingly would have taken hours of thought by an individual, it can do in moments.
Moments. Moments. Like, one of the best things I love for it goes back to the fact that you have a brain that can create things. Poof, people don't do that well. Brainstorming is one of the most powerful things. You can give it a document that said, brainstorm with me different pathways based on these criterias. And the brainstorming is magnificent and fast. And then you could
Yeah.
put your criteria on it. So it becomes ultimately one of the best skill sets to work in this world is good language skills. Someone who's a
Mhm.
really good communicator, someone who a really good explainer can be very, very, can build very, very strong skills in getting phenomenal output in these environments. So you do have to train on prompting. After you give them the tool, after you give them the structure, you got to teach them how to prompt.
So let's, for the people who are listening who aren't familiar with prompt and prompt structure, for the rest of us, we think in terms of just a search query, right? Like, give me blue jeans, give me a picture of a toaster, right? You think about prompt development. Can you go into what proper prompting
Mhm.
is and maybe give an example of what that is?
Yeah,
Because I think,
there's 2 avenues but I have 2 avenues of thought. First off, go into Google and type in prompting strategies for AI, and you'll be 1,000 articles now. That's first off, right? And you can read through those articles. I like 2 strategies. I like the exploration strategy, or I like to just dump strategy. The
yeah,
exploration strategy is I'm looking for a really good pair of jeans. What would you suggest? All right, I'm a male, I'm overweight, I'm 5'6". Give me some thoughts there. I'm 57 years old. What's the trends for males overweight what style jeans would they be looking for? Okay, great. I get that. All right, how tight are these jeans or what type of materials do they work with? So I'll just start I'll be having just like I was having a conversation with a sales associate, I would be using that to have a conversation to get to the point where I can get a great deal of information and then finally say, okay, based on everything you said, find me 3 or 4 places I can buy those jeans. Right? So that might take me 30 minutes of elaboration,
Mhm.
right? The other avenue is I just did this. I have to write a script for a LinkedIn Live. And so I said, okay, I'm writing a script for a LinkedIn Live. Here's the URL for the LinkedIn Live. Here's the one person who's going to be on it. Here's the other person that's going to be on it. Here's what we're thinking about. Here's the website to pull information from. Now write me some questions based on all the information I just gave you. When you're doing video and image, the actually works so much better. Like if you really want to do images, the best image designers for prompting are people who do photography because they'll get so subtle
Interesting.
in what they will ask it to do and
Mhm.
in such fidelity that the image is going to be beautiful. And I've
That
watched a
was one of the
guru do
first
this.
things on our side that we found because what we're doing is image generation on behalf of Marketing
Yep.
Construct. The second that I realized that it understood, I want you to use Tri-X film. I want you to shoot with this level of granularity. I want you to shoot with this lens. I want you to shoot with this lighting,
Yep.
and I want you to mirror Annie Leibovitz photography style. And it said, "Oh, sure, no problem. Here you go."
Isn't it amazing?
And it blew me away.
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, change the focal length to this. I want you to change the depth of field. I want everything else to be this way." And it was like, "No problem." And it could track all of
That's
that.
why somebody's not gonna compete against you. Here's the biggest adage in this space that I say all the time now. A fool with a tool is still a fool.
Mhm.
If I had a person here with some AI experience up against you trying to win a deal with an image, you would kick their butt with the tool, even though you both had the same tool. Because of just what you said. Your depth of knowledge with this tool turns into a superpower. And this is what you try to teach people. You try to teach people that your depth of knowledge with the tool's capability will make you do things faster, more effective than you ever could dream of it. And that's when it gets really exciting.
Where won't it go? What isn't it good at?
Like, why? If you ask it why enough times, it will. I asked it one day about an exclamation point. I put an exclamation point at the end, and I was just I was in a feisty mood. And we had a great conversation about why I put an exclamation point at the end of the sentence, and it just fried out. It was great. I started laughing. It just fried out. It was fun.
Yeah.
So why? Another thing is if you're trying to do too broad a base of information, it's a predictive algorithm. If you're just trying to pull things from the internet, say I wanted to create a article about New Zealand rock bands. I didn't know a thing about New Zealand rock bands, and I just wanted to pull it out of the cloud, out of the language algorithms go out to whatever access data they got available at that current moment. There's so much more hallucination opportunities. It still does a pretty piss poor job there, right? You have to be very cognizant and watchful when you're trying to use it that way. That's why I try to lean people more towards specific locations on the internet, specific pieces of information, and then specific things you can add up. Because in 2003, you couldn't do that. In 2003, when this thing, all you could do is just pull from whatever data source it had available to it, and then the hallucinations were like rampant. So
Yeah.
you got to understand that you can control those hallucinations. You got to be smart about it. So it can't do that. It doesn't like we have a whole slide on this too, by the way, Bill. It's fun. Like, does a human do really well? Does the AI do really well? And they correlate. It's really interesting. That's why the Ethan Mollick book, Co-Intelligence, is so cool to me. It really doesn't understand levels. Like you give it sediment analysis, but it's still a predictive scenario. It'll come up with some cool stuff. It's not going to understand cause and effect. They'll give you some rationale associated with it, but it won't know if you're in a bad mood or good mood when you had that meeting. And it'll look at some of your language and might say you're in a good mood, and you might want be interested, even though you're not, and you were just in a good mood because you had a good candy bar. an hour ago,
Mhm.
right? So the nuance is it does some of cool things that make it look like it's good, but it's not doesn't have the level of human nuance, the level of cause and effect. Its problem solving will only be based on the derivative information it's got, and it will not create from scratch. It's a derivative technology. It will only create within the box that it has or that you put it in. It will not create from scratch. It's a derivative technology because it's a predictive
This is
technology.
something I wish more people understood, and I'm gonna use an example here. So, a lot of times in our industry, because of marketing and people wanting to shortcut the process of marketing because they don't really understand it in the first place, they'll say, "Make me an ad." And what they'll get is an ad. They got exactly what they asked for.
No.
Here is a thing with a headline and a picture
Yep.
and some body copy, and yes, I can check the box. That is an ad. Never mind the fact that two things are true. Number one, this ad is in no way unique. Anybody else that also happened to be selling dog collars and put in the same prompt is going to get virtually the same output. And there's no cross correlation between the two of them. And number two, just because you have a thing doesn't mean that that thing works well. So not only do you have something now that looks just like anybody else that did the thing that you just did, but it has no value to the reader because what you were doing was trying to check a box of creation rather than do something that would actually motivate people.
Imagine
And
copying
I'll
something
find
that doesn't work. So this as human beings, we'll look at everything,
yeah.
we'll only try to copy those things that work. This thing doesn't have any idea whether it worked or not. It's just going to copy it.
Well, and even if you ask it what things were more useful than others, it's going to go to the lowest common denominator. And anybody in the creative industry will tell you the last place in the world you want to do or be is copying what already worked. What you want to do instead is create a new thing that works. So that's a whole thing in and of itself. When you're talking about larger businesses, when we're talking about the 50 million to, $500 million corporations that are thinking about bringing this stuff in, how important is putting those boundaries in place, the compliance
Even
issues
more,
and the rest of it?
even more important, I think. So one of the things a big company has to look at is there's reasons IT is involved and there's reasons IT isn't involved. So when you're picking the tool and the policy, that's really a legal HR executive decision. Now, IT can have some insight into the capabilities of the tools and where they want to be. But this is an expression of your culture, it's the expression of your beliefs. How you do AI is an expression of yourself as a company, which avenue you go and how you do it. And so when you're going down the personal productivity side, you got to realize there's not much AI, IT involvement outside of some tool choices. It really becomes leadership's ability to communicate it, managers' ability to set the guidelines, and then the individual's ability to figure out what use cases to do and go at it. Where IT and corporations get involved is when you go down the automation space. So large corporations have a great deal of opportunity with Agentic. So Agentic is with Gen AI, you're the agent. So when you and I work on Gen AI, we walk in front of Claude and we begin typing. I'm the agent. I'm engaging Claude, and Claude gives me an output, and I engage that output and do something with it. Agentics is when you stack Gen AI capability on top of one another for it to ultimately do an autonomous task that usually takes a human being to do.
Give an example of that for folks that aren't familiar.
Email, I can set up a very simple agent to respond to every email that comes into your inbox. There'll probably be 2 or 3 agents that are working. One agent might be sourcing the email out, one agent might be reading through it, another agent might be writing it, and another agent might check it out just to make sure everything's good and copacetic, and then it will send that email out for you. So you no longer would have to engage the emails coming into your inbox. All right.
Yeah.
That might not be a great solution for some people, but I've seen it. Another one might be, say you're in a highly regulated environment, you have 13 states, each one of the states have different regulatory pieces of information that need to be put on your product. I can set up a bot to be able to go out, look for that information, store it, and then bring it back to the company to put onto whatever label it needs to be put onto, and then keep checking back for any changes. And if there's changes, I can set the bot up to actually make the change on the label, and the label will be changed in real time. Now, that is doable. No, it's not easy, but agents can be set up to do that type of autonomous task. Or the information source has to be relatively no, it has to be completely available. It's got to be completely trusted, and then the tool can pull that information down and then do the replicative work that maybe a human would do to get it into your environment. So those are
I
two
remember
examples.
when I was working on Denny's a number of years ago, one of the guys on the design team made a mistake on something that had alcohol in it, and it was 0.01% of alcohol in this thing, and it was a cappuccino or something. They made a typo, and it said 1% instead of 0.01%. And so they had to create 1,000,000 stickers and then apply 1,000,000 stickers to this thing that they had standing on the tables across all of the Denny's across the United States, because legally you couldn't misrepresent it that way.
1,000,000 stickers. I love this story.
1,000,000 stickers that then had to be applied, and it was a two-sided piece, so it had to be applied on each side, and it was in a freestanding carafe, and it was like, so this infinitesimal thing cost
Oh,
$100,000 in
easy.
stickers, plus all the man-hours to go
Yes.
put them on, just to correct one typo. And when you think about the way that you could be using AI to proofread, to check against, those kinds of things, it gets really good. And here's something that most people I don't think have really figured out yet is that when you talk about training an AI agent, you can train it not just on the compliance or the logistics of an organization, but you can also train it on a tone of voice.
Yeah.
But it has to be managed because
Yeah.
in my experience, it's when you train an AI on a tone of voice, it's a lot like having cucumbers. Like the vines run, and then all of a sudden you've got another voice that's popped up a few feet away,
Yeah.
and it tends to migrate a little. You have to continuously cut it back to keep it in its own environment because it will wander. But they do a good job of, you can get a tone of voice. You can definitely see the difference in a writing style between a humorous tone of voice, a sarcastic tone of voice, someone who is factually based versus ideologically based. You can absolutely dial those things in and create something that's pretty remarkable in terms of content creation.
Two things on that. The first is that it can't automatically pivot if you think the tone should be adjusted, right? So that's the one thing. Number two is I think you said something critically important. My concern about Agentics is that this technology is developed to learn and to provide an output no matter what. Even though you're going to have bot on top of bot on top of bot checking one another, the opportunity for it to go off the reservation is still there. And so this idea of supervising the output in Agentics, just like you talked about, is critically important. You just can't let the agentic system run wild. And that's supervised AI. We've had that in the machine learning forever. Ethan Mollick talks about that with the human in the loop. And as you start doing these agentic automation stacks, you've got to audit the output on a consistent basis because the technology is based to go off the reservation, just like you said.
You said something that was kind of interesting, but I didn't understand it, which was that token bleed was gonna become a real thing. Can you
Yeah.
talk
Yeah,
about that?
that's a good one. I'm glad you threw that out there because
Be
2026 is the
be
year of agentics and automation, and 2027 is the year where companies say, "Why did I let it happen?" So what we got to realize is this technology is huge consumer of energy, huge consumer. And you can see that the big companies like Microsoft's and OpenAI's are going to the energy conferences now. They're looking at alternative solutions, and nuclear seems to be the one that they're all gravitating towards right now, including Microsoft turning on one of the reactors on 3 Mile Island to start powering up some of their data centers. So a token is a syllable of a prediction that the systems use to build up all the responses it gives you. Each prediction is based on a small piece and small element. Each one of those tokens has an energy cost. As you start generating tokens, you get a certain amount of energy that your paid subscription allows you to have. And if you dig into the bowels of your SLA, it will come out. Companies like Claude and Anthropic have a lower barrier because they're not going to do advertising. Companies like OpenAI have a higher barrier because they got tons of cash. They're burning, and their goal is to get advertising going. It's in some circles, if I have an engineer who's doing software coding and they're using Claude to code most of their software, there's a good chance that they might cost an extra $100 to $300,000 of token bleed based on the amount of work that they're doing with the tool. And that means the cost over and above their use that Anthropic charges the company because of the use that they're doing. Some people on this call have already seen it. Our marketing manager has already seen it at a small level. $20 here, $30 there, and some of the heavier image stuff, some of the heavier processing stuff. And just think about it. When you have multiple agents stacked on each other, all working 24/7, the token bleed opportunity becomes significant. And this is what you have to watch out for when you go into Agentics, is understanding what your service level agreement is, what your expectations are to charge, because most of the service providers are putting in if you hire me to build you an automated X, in my service level agreement, it's going to be you pay for the extra tokens. I'm not going to pay for it. I'll build you the system, but then you're stuck having to pay for the extra tokens.
Such an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah,
Is
that
the
goes back to
hidden
the old.
cost.
This is the early stages of cloud. AWS
Yeah.
and the cloud vendors did the same thing because storage was still not so ubiquitous yet, and they wanted to make some extra money. So you were given an SLA with a certain amount of storage, and if you went beyond that, you'd have to pay. Minutes. Cell phones started this way, right? You have a certain amount of minutes you have to pay. It's just not going to be that easy because of unless the energy thing is solved. There'll be some crazy token numbers that get churned out in 2027 and beyond.
Especially when you consider that only, 14% of people or 16% of people are even aware of this tech and using it yet. The overwhelming input of corporate need as this happens is going to be profound. I worry about a couple of things. I worry about the lack of original thinking, and I worry about young people having the opportunity to become the people that can shepherd the AI. And, you spoke to earlier the fact that, hey, a person who's familiar with and experienced with a subject, the tool becomes very sharp and very useful. And for those who don't have it, it makes them it's
Makes them
counterintuitive.
look,
They
make them dumber.
become more dull because they don't think about it. Do you have any predictions or recommendations or suggestions for companies that are coming into the use of AI on how to protect against that void? Because I think you're going to have a very quickly aging out experiential group that's going to be replaced by a dependency on AI that no one's even talking about yet.
And I'll tie that back into the education system. So in VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, it forces you to get away from standard procedures. Our education system is about making a professor happy. It's about filling a certain level of criteria and then getting impacted if you make a failure. So there's going to have to be a pivot. So in corporations, what I tell people is you've got to start focusing on problem solving. You got to start focusing more on critical thinking. You got to start focusing more on system thinking. You really have to build and maintain these skills within your communities, because there is a chance that these tools can lighten those skill sets. If left to their own regard, you might start doing critical thinking with these tools instead of rethinking your thinking based on research, based on cognitive diversity, based on bringing in a lot more outside relevant topics. So I think the solving of this is focusing on where you're going to educate your knowledge workers, getting away from just science. I'm not going to teach a project manager how to do net present value or how to create a Gantt chart. These tools can do it. But I am going to talk the project manager more about emotional intelligence. I'm going to talk to them about complex problem solving. I'm going to have them work on more critical thinking analysis. And then companies have to start pivoting to more testing. The whole design thinking world can be just blown up with these tools and utilized for such good around corporations testing to stay competitive against the unicorns.
Yeah.
And they get crushed by the unicorns right now. I mean, a company stays on the S&P 500 for just 12 years now on average. Used to be 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
So being able to utilize these tools in testing to get more visibility out into other opportunities that the big corporation could be doing, that will help them. And then teaching on some of those more critical skills, because the real piece of this is the calculator. Did the calculator make us dumber? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Did a computer make us dumber? That's a question you have to ask yourself. Did the internet make us dumber? That's a question you have to ask yourself.
Well, there was a big argument about if you provide everybody a phone, you reduce or remove the education gap. And I'm afraid that that experiment has proven that that isn't exactly the outcome that we got, which is a shame because I think there were a lot of people that were hoping that that was going to be the case. You know, put a phone in someone's hand and they have access to the world. But the truth is if you don't have a desire to access it, you're still not going to make good use of it.
Yeah, that's the
Therein
key.
lies the problem.
And teaching them the importance of, like, if all my job is to do is make that professor happy, I can get my master's degree without much effort. I mean, as I started learning that in the middle of college, I was like, this is the easiest thing ever.
Yeah.
Now, did I hurt myself by not going after cool new topics and pushing the envelope? Yeah. I learned that more when I started building companies and products and realizing that,
That didn't come until later.
yeah, that didn't come till
David,
later.
this was a fantastic introduction into AI and the implications that it has on business. Thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom and experience with us today. Tell everybody where they can find you and more information about you as they move forward in their own AI
Yeah,
evolution.
LinkedIn is the best. I'm like one of the only people with this crazy name. So you type in David Mantica, search LinkedIn, you'll find me. Lots of events, lots of content. And then from there, www.softed.com. Web seminars, lots of free content that you can enjoy and dig into as you go down this path.
David, thanks so much again for being on. We really appreciate it. I look forward to talking with you again and getting some more information on this subject. It's a good one.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You bet.